Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about the most recent Savage tier, Arcadion Light Heavyweight, and give some of my thoughts on it. I'm a little late to the party with this sort of video. The kind of people you would normally watch for something like this have already gotten their videos out a while ago now. Was it weeks 7 of the tier being out? And most of those videos were done week 1, so I'm a little behind the times on this. But I thought, you know what, I might as well talk about it. No point in just scrapping the video idea because I'm a little late, you know. I tried scripting this video and my script was not going anywhere because I don't have much to talk about for individual bosses, and there's no point in me like going through mechanics one by one. If you're watching this video, you have probably cleared the tier. I'm guessing most people have probably cleared the tier who are watching this. You don't need me to go through each mechanic explaining it. And if you haven't cleared the tier, you don't need to know each mechanic to understand what I mean when I say I like something. So that script was kind of going nowhere. Instead, I'm just going to ramble and see how that goes. So first off, I think it's important to talk about the sort of expectations people had and I had going into this. Because Yoshi P said in, was it E3, I think? Yeah, E3, before Dawntrail came out, he said something very interesting, that the developers wanted to change the way fights were designed in Dawntrail. They wanted to sort of spice things up. They wanted to stop falling into the same mechanical traps that they fall into with fights, and just generally make the game more interesting to play. And this set the raiding community on fire with excitement. Everyone was excited, thinking about what would this mean? What's gonna change? How are things gonna be different? Stuff like that. But there's all these expectations going into Dawntrail about how things were going to change, how they might get better or worse or whatever. As we saw, doing leveling dungeons, doing trials, doing the 2 extremes, they were true to their word. Fights are more interesting overall without necessarily being insanely different from what we've come to expect, but they are generally more interesting, they're faster, engaging, and get a little bit more creative with some mechanics. And all of this leads into Arcadion Normal and then Savage. What are they going to do different? And I think the light heavyweight tier overall actually met expectations, surprisingly. I thought this tier was pretty good overall. There are some disappointments, some gripes I have, but I think if they want to sort of change up their formula, the light heavyweight tier has been a great first step of that. I think it's more fun than any of the Endwalker tiers, Savage tiers. You know, maybe Asphodelos is on par with it. I liked Asphodelos a lot, but even then, like, looking back at Asphodelos, those fights were really slow. They had some fun mechanics, some interesting ideas, but they were pretty slow. While light heavyweight doesn't feel very slow. It feels like you're always doing something, always getting ready for something, and that's awesome. I think they could be a little bit more creative with some of the mechanics, and I'll get into that in a moment. But overall, a good first step. Now, why do I say it's a good first step, not just good, period? Well, it is good, don't get me wrong. I definitely enjoyed it, but I think the fights did not branch out enough from Endwalker, I feel, in some ways. Primarily the stored mechanics of like remembering if it's stack or spread or partners or whatever for M2 and M3. Those two in particular, I really didn't like the stack spread mechanic. I thought it was overused in both those fights and just overused in general. And I was a little disappointed in those two in particular. M2 especially, I was disappointed more than anything because doing the normal mode, the normal mode is really like exciting when you think about the possibilities. The tower spawning in random spots, the hearts moving across the arena. There's lots of little micromanagement, micro adjustments that you have to make on the fly while doing the fight, and that's something this game has kind of lacked on the fly decision making in general. And M2 Savage had this for the first half. Once you get past the first half, the second half of the fight is a lot less of that. And I was somewhat disappointed that there wasn't more sort of on the fly adjustments. It's not that the fight itself was bad, you know. I don't think any mechanic in M2 is not fun. M2 is pretty fun. But the stack spread overuse and the general lack of on the fly adjustments in the second half left me a little disappointed that there could have been more and they chose not to. But again, it's a fun fight overall. I didn't mind it. M3 was the other fight I thought was a little disappointing. I just didn't find it very fun. Again, with the stack spread and out or in or knockback or proximity, just lots of like randomness there, but not a fun kind of randomness where it's just look at what he's doing, move accordingly. I don't think that sort of mechanic design is particularly fun, especially when it's used as the entire basis of the fight. M3 honestly has like 5 mechanics. I can hardly remember what happens because so much of the fight is him slamming the ground with raid wides, slamming the ground with tank busters, or doing just some basic stack spread mechanic, and I was really disappointed in it, to be honest. The mechanics that are there are somewhat interesting, but feel equally slow and just unengaging. Chain deathmatch is a cool idea, but that mechanic takes like 30 seconds to happen, and it's mostly just get hit by one AoE and then dodge the other, and that's it. And then he does another 30 seconds of like raid wides and tank busters, and it's like that's how I feel about the fight in general. Just nothing really feels like it's happening. Fuse field was a cool mechanic. I like that. The bomb mechanic is mildly annoying. I play monk, and having to look at my head, the fuse on my head while I'm pressing Phantom Rush and my burst and I'm teleporting around the boss different ways, was a little annoying. But aside from that, I thought, you know, the bomb mechanic was pretty fun. Fuse field was decently fun, and honestly that's about it. The rest of the fight just felt very slow and monotonous. I was not a big fan. Going backwards for a second, M1 I thought was really good. I don't have much to say about it, just it was really fun. And I think it's a good introduction, because the first fight of the tier is always, you know, the introduction for the new players, the baby raiders. You know, this is their first fight that they're going into, so it has to be a little bit easier, a little bit more of an introduction. I think Black Cat was pretty good at being an introduction without being a pushover. It didn't feel like Arcadion, where there was one mechanic and everything else was just sit around and do nothing. I guess 2 mechanics. Was it the ice and fire and fourfold shackles, which is a dumb mechanic, but Black Cat definitely better than Arcadion, definitely better than Kokitos from Anabaxios, who again just felt very slow and monotonous, but was also stupid hard for new players. Body checks in every mechanic and a fucking limit cut halfway through. A little bit much. Black Cat feels like a better introduction where it's a lot of, you know, more personal responsibility for new players without feeling like them messing up is going to instantly wipe the group, explode, cost the pull, etc. I think that was good. I've heard some people say it was too easy, or there was not enough different from the normals. Normals were already harder than normals usually are, especially in Endwalker. The normals were pretty easy. So I think the normals being slightly harder and M1 being just the normal mode with a bit extra, I think that's fine. It feels kind of like an extreme, but a step up from an extreme, and that's, I think, where the first fight of a tier should be, ideally. And now I can talk about Wicked Thunder, which is the focus of a tier is usually on the final boss, and Wicked Thunder is my favorite out of the tier, and I think it's probably most people's favorites. It's really fun and really breaks out of some of the Endwalker mold in a good way. I love Wicked Thunder. I think it's the most fun Savage fight they've come up with in a long time. I didn't do Eden and Shadowbringers, unfortunately. Otherwise, maybe I could compare it to the Eden bosses. Just compared to Endwalker, it's more fun than anything in Endwalker. It's more fun than Hesperos, which was my previous favorite. P4 Phase 2 was my previous favorite. But that going back and doing that fight, it is so slow. That motherfucker stands still casting Act 2 for a while, and then casts like a Buster, and then starts the Act 2 mechanic. That shit's slow. Like, Wicked Thunder, way cooler. I loved the amount of melee downtime in the fight. It was more than M2 and M3, which I think, again, as a sort of introduction, they're a good introduction to melee downtime for new raiders. You don't have to move out that far, and experienced raiders can learn to move quickly and greed GCDs. Wicked Thunder does not let you greed some mechanics, and I think that's kind of cool. When she does, you know, the lines on the floor, you have to move. If it's like out and DPS bait far, you have to go all the way to the corner. You are not greeting shit. And I quite enjoyed that. I also enjoyed the Witch Hunt, you know, the out and in, the Nash and Lash mechanic. That one's really fun, specifically because you can greet it if you're really cracked. I still have trouble greeting it on some mechanics. I've gotten to the point I can kind of feel, based on my GC timing and the AoE timing, if I can greet it or not. It's hard, but very rewarding to greet, and I love that. The mechanic itself is fun as well. It feels like sort of a step down from Nidhogg in DSR, which is cool. I like it. Wicked Thunder in general feels like it's a ultimate tuned down, and to me that's what the last boss of a Savage should feel like. I think it's fine for ultimates to be, you know, sort of a jump up in difficulty. You know, this is the hardest content. It shouldn't be just Savage Plus, right? I think ultimates being a jump up instead of just a step up is good, but I also think Savages should sort of prepare you a bit for it. Wicked Thunder feels like an ultimate fight tuned down. No door boss. It's like 12 minutes long, so it's a long fight. Things like Witch Hunt feel like just Nash and Lash from DSR, but without the tower shenanigans. So you have some different shenanigans to bait, which are easier, so it feels like a toned down version of Nidhogg. Nidhogg's already my favorite ultimate phase, so I'm just happy to see Nash and Lash back. And there's something else. I can't remember now. Oh, the like cannon blast, and you have the 3 color stacks. Almost felt like, honestly, a more fun version of Hello World from top. The ion cannon, definitely simpler than Hello World, but to me it just felt more fun. It felt like this is what Hello World should have been. The transition felt like Nail from UCOB. That was also cool. It just felt like, at least the first half, they just took a bunch of ideas from Ultimates, threw them together, and like, the transition's really cool. The phase 2 is really cool. I think really my only complaint with Wicked Thunder, Sunrise Sabbath should not be 11 minutes into the fight. That should have been the mechanic right after transition, I think. Sunrise, it's not that hard, but it's not easy either. I've learned that the hard way, killing my static a couple times on it, because the like uptime strat that people do is really precise, and my ass playing monk is breakdancing, pressing dragon kick, and I can't see my feet well enough, and I'm slightly off center, and then I shoot someone. I just think Sunrise is a little too late to have a mechanic like that 11 minutes into the fight, especially now that you can skip it with DPS. Like, that mechanic should be at, you know, the 6-minute mark or the 7-minute mark, and then slowly wind down from that. You've got your final test, and then you've got the sort of like choke check at the end. Sunrise doesn't feel like a choke check, it feels like a prog point, and I think that's bad to have 11 minutes in. It's a fun mechanic, it's a good one, just a little late, and it feels bad wiping when the boss is at like 2%, because you have to do fucking snakes again. It's a little too much. But other than that, Wicked Thunder was awesome. So that does somewhat lead me to my next point of DPS checks this tier. This topic has been done to death. People have talked about it a lot already. I don't need to go over it a ton, but DPS checks were really disappointing. It's not what I want from anything really. I like tight DPS checks. I think, honestly, if I'm gonna play a melee and the fight is full uptime without a DPS check, I feel like I'm useless. It really feels like there's no point for me to be there if I'm not having to greed uptime, if I'm not having to actually optimize my damage. If I can just sort of backseat, like dance in my chair while mechanics are going on, while the healers are like struggling to heal, top everyone off in time, the tanks are like mapping out their mitigations, and I'm just sitting there doing jack shit, like that feels bad. This tier was better in terms of melee downtime, rewarding you for greeting and also forcing you to move out sometimes, finding ways to deal with downtime without losing as much damage. Like, all that was really good this year. The DPS checks, however, were not. The fact that you could skip sword quiver, you know, the like slices, the final mechanic of M4. The fact that you could skip that week 1 is fucking insane. My static cleared week 2, and it's like, we saw the first one, I think, and just fucking blasted the boss. Like, that's too much. In our re-clears this week, we skipped sunrise entirely. Like, holy shit. That's too much, I think. Granted, we're in almost full bis, all of us now. That's, what, last minute and a half, 2 minutes off the enrage timer for the final fight of Savage tier? That's a bit much. I'm hoping Fru and the other Savage tiers aren't this disappointing. You know, Yoshi P said it was a mistake, and I believe him. They haven't done a tier this lax on DPS in a while, but it's still disappointing and still makes me worried that, you know, maybe after like Abyssos and top, maybe they're worried about doing DPS checks again, which is a shame because I loved top's DPS check. I didn't get to do it on patch. I did it in 6.4. Yeah, we started in 6.4, then I cleared in 6.5. Those DPS checks felt good in there, in that range. Like, tight enough that you would see them during prog, you would wipe to enrage a bit, but also loose enough that once you got comfortable, you could just blast the phase. You could afford a death sometimes. I think that was good. Maybe a little bit too loose if you were in like an absolute pumper group, but I was hoping like Wicked Thunder would feel a little bit like that. Maybe let you afford like one death or something, but generally feel like you have to play pretty well to clear. And I hope Fru especially feels like you really need to optimize your damage to get through a phase. I want another like blue screen phase where everyone is just trying to optimize your damage for that specific phase, hold resources, hold buffs, stuff like that. I really want something like that again, and I hope we get it in Fru. I'm kind of rambling about other shit now, that's not the tier, but I just hope the DPS checks in the future are better than this tier's was. The last thing I want to talk about is, I already mentioned it a bit, but body checks. I think this tier was a lot better on body checks than Abyssos and Anabasios and even Asphodelos, honestly. Body checks are fine when they're in limited amounts, but every mechanic being a body check is just frustrating. This tier felt a lot better. It used body checks well instead of constantly. Things like, you know, the ion cannon in M4, or like Sunrise, Sabbath, or other mechanics. Yes, you needed everyone alive for those, and then other mechanics felt like, well, you could have someone die, you could raise them, you could recover. Something like Transition feels like a sweet spot where You can recover, but it's a little tricky. There's a potential for that to snowball easily, but you can recover. And I think that's how mechanics should generally feel. It should feel like you can recover, but things can snowball quickly. This tier felt a lot better with that, and I'm hoping Fru will feel the same. Obviously it's an ultimate, so I do want more body checks, I want more strictness, I want generally harder, but I hope Fru... Honestly, this tier just makes me really excited for Fru in general. If Fru feels like Wicked Thunder, I'm gonna love it. It's gonna be on par with DSR for my favorite fight. Overall, I really enjoyed this tier. I'm really happy with how it turned out. It makes me very excited for the future of the game. Just overall really fun, really interesting. Good first step towards more interesting, engaging bosses. And I can't wait to see more. I'm really excited for Fru when that comes out. I'm really excited for the subsequent tiers. I think they're all going to be fun. So with that, thank you all for watching, listening to me ramble. I hope I didn't ramble too insanely. I'll probably end up cutting this audio quite a bit so that I sound somewhat coherent when I'm talking. You know, I sort of rambled about like DSR and top for a bit for no reason, but hopefully this was fun to listen to. I want to do another video. I'll get back to melee guides at some point. I also want to do another video talking just about how I feel about the melees, how they're designed. I have a lot to say about that. So I want to get another video like that, and my Dragoon guide, I'm working on that. So those will be coming soon. Probably both coming within the next month. Hopefully. I start a new job soon, so maybe that takes up too much time. We'll see. But anyway, thanks for watching, friends. I will see you all in the next one. Peace.